Nero Wolfe, when silence spoke. Wolfe sits in his chair, satisfied, commenting, "A locked room lies, Archie. A frightened woman lies. But a creature that mimics truth cannot help but speak it. Sometimes, silence speaks louder than men, if only one listens." Chapter 1, A Visitor with Fear in Her Eyes. The doorbell rang at 10 minutes past 11, a time specifically engineered to irritate Nero Wolfe. 11 o'clock is when he settles in the plant rooms upstairs to commune with orchids and refuse communication with humanity. I, being humanity's representative on the premises, went to answer it. The woman standing on the stoop looked as if fear itself had wrapped both hands around her throat. She was Indian, early 30s, slender and sharply dressed, but her eyes were wide and haunted, and the tremor in her voice came through even in the single word she managed. "Please." I opened the door wider. When someone shows up begging with their eyes alone, you don't ask them to be articulate. "Come in," I said. "If it's the IRS, the landlord, or someone with a casserole, you're too late. Everyone else is welcome." She stepped inside with the hesitant motion of someone entering a sanctuary she wasn't sure she had a right to. Her hands clutched a slim leather purse against her chest as if it were armor. I led her to the office, where Wolfe, yawning mildly, was settling behind his desk with the irritation of a man being forced to acknowledge the existence of time. He glanced at her, then at me, then at his watch. He was calculating the odds that she was about to complicate his day. His expression suggested the odds were not in her favor. "Your name?" he asked. "Anjali Mehra." Her voice cracked halfway through the second syllable. Wolfe frowned at the tremor. Fear makes him uneasy, he prefers clients who are merely greedy. "Sit." She perched on the edge of the red leather chair as if afraid her weight might offend it. I took the other chair, prepared to translate emotion into statements. Wolfe folded his hands atop his vast middle. "Well," he said. "My partner," she whispered. My business partner. Raghav Sinha. He's dead." People often bring tragedy into Wolfe's office, but they normally wrap it in outrage or suspicion. This woman brought it raw. Tears had pooled but not fallen. Fear had frozen them in place. "I'm sorry for your loss," Wolfe muttered automatically, which was his way of saying let's proceed. "They said he killed himself," she went on. "This morning. The police. They said the room was locked from the inside, no signs of anything else. They said it was clear. And you disagree?" Wolfe didn't phrase it as a question. "It wasn't." She nodded quickly. "Yes. I don't believe it, can't believe it. But I have no proof. Nothing except." She swallowed hard. Her hands tightened around the purse until her fingers went pale. "Except what?" I asked gently. She looked straight at me, then at Wolfe, drawing breath like someone about to plunge underwater. "Except his parrot," she said. "It keeps screaming words. The same words. Over and over. The exact same tone, like it heard it happen. It says, 'No. Don't do it, stop.'" Even Wolfe jerked slightly in his chair. Not a lot, nothing Wolfe does is athletic, but enough to count as surprise in his world. "A parrot," he repeated flatly. "Yes," she said. Raghav raised it himself. "It mimics everything. And today, since he died, it won't stop repeating those words." "Parrots repeat anything," Wolfe said. "They do not analyze." "I know," she said quickly. "I know it's ridiculous. But the way it screams it, the fear in it, he never taught it that tone. And Raghav would never, he didn't," her breath hitched. "He didn't sound terrified of himself." I leaned back. This was unusual even for our line of work. I glanced at Wolfe, who was staring at her with the same irritation he reserves for problems involving either excessive emotion or exotic pets. In this case, he had both. What were the circumstances? I asked. She explained, Raghav had been alone last night in his office at their construction design firm. The door was found locked from the inside, the only key was in his pocket. The window was latched. No signs of struggle. A pistol near his hand. The official story wore the comfortable slippers of suicide. But she didn't believe it. Her voice cracked every time she said his name. Wolfe shifted in his chair, a sure sign interest had slipped past annoyance. Why did you come to me? Surely the police. They don't listen, she said. They barely let me speak. They said grief makes people irrational. They told me parrots don't testify. I know that. But something is wrong. I can feel it. Wolfe grimaced. I detest intuition. I know, she whispered. But I don't know where else to go. Please. Just tell me if I'm wrong. Tell me he really, please. She wasn't trying to hire us to avenge a murder. She was begging Wolfe to absolve her of doubt. That, if anything, was more dangerous. Doubt can cost more than guilt. Wolfe looked at her for a long moment, fingers pressed together under his chin. His reluctance was thick enough to butter toast with. Archie, he said at last, give me a description of Miss Mara's demeanor. Terrified, I said. Yes. Wolfe sighed. Miss Mara, fear is odious, but it is compelling. Explain your relationship with Mr. Sinha. She did, haltingly. They were partners in a mid-size architectural firm, Sinha and Mara Design Group. Raghav handled structural planning and financial oversight, she managed client relations and creative development. They'd built the business together from scratch, they'd trusted each other's instincts. No romantic involvement, she clarified quickly, as if Wolfe might be offended by the possibility. Then, almost under her breath, she added, he was the best man I knew. Something happened last night that shouldn't have. Wolfe grunted. Archie. I pulled my notebook. Yes, sir. You will accompany Miss Mara to the scene. You will examine it thoroughly and report back. Anjali blinked, startled. You'll take the case. I'll consider it, Wolfe said. After Mr. Goodwin brings me details not filtered through panic or grief. She let out a breath that nearly collapsed her. Thank you. Thank you both. Don't thank us yet, I said. Wolfe only accepts clients after he's certain they can afford him. And he hasn't heard your parrot. She managed a faint, broken smile. It made her look human again. Wolfe waved a hand like swatting away a persistent notion. Mr. Goodwin, see to it. I stood. Anjali rose as well, clutching her purse again. As I escorted her out, I glanced back. Wolfe sat motionless, eyes narrowed, already chewing on the puzzle like a man who resents the flavor but can't resist another bite. A locked room, a suspicious death, and a parrot shouting ghostly warnings. Wolfe hated the melodrama of it, but he loved the intellectual knots. And this one was tied tightly. In the hallway, Anjali paused. Her face had regained some color, but her hands still shook. Thank you, she murmured. I didn't know who else to ask. Let's just see what your partner left behind, I said. And what his feathered friend knows that the rest of us don't. She nodded, and we stepped out into the cold street. Above us, somewhere inside the brownstone, Wolfe was settling back into his chair, preparing to be annoyed by orchids and murder in equal measure. The case had begun. And if I'd learned anything working for Nero Wolfe, it was this. When a frightened woman knocks on our door, the quiet of the brownstone doesn't last long. Chapter 2, The Locked Room That Lied. The office of Sinha and Mara Design Group occupied the top floor of a 6-story glass and concrete effort trying hard to look important on Madison Avenue. It had a reception desk, a tasteful logo on the wall, and the faint smell of printer ink and ambition. At that hour of the afternoon, the place was quiet enough to hear nerves. Anjali walked ahead of me, shoulders tight, like she was bracing for impact. A uniformed cop sat outside the inner corridor behind a strip of crime scene tape, leaning on a chair that looked like a poor match for his weight and his boredom. He stood up when he saw us. "Ma'am, the area's closed. No one goes in without clearance." Anjali turned to me, then back to him. "This is Archie Goodwin. He works with Nero Wolfe," I finished. "You've heard of him. Big fellow, hates moving, keeps me underpaid." The cop snorted softly. "I've heard of you, too. You're early." "Early for what?" "Inspector Kramer said you'd probably show up to stick your nose in." He eyed me but didn't sound hostile, just resigned. "He left word. Let me call it in." He reached for the phone on a credenza. The conversation was short and mostly grunts on his end. Then he hung up, lifted the tape, and stepped aside. "You can go in," he said. "Don't move anything. Don't touch the body. Don't tell Kramer I said you look honest. I'll leave your good opinion off the record." He almost smiled. Anjali stayed near the entrance to the corridor as I moved down it. At the end, a glass door bore frosted lettering, Raghav Sinha, Managing Partner. Another strip of tape crossed it. I eased under and stepped inside. The room had 2 walls of windows and too much gray. Gray walls, gray shelves, gray filing cabinets. It was the kind of office that wanted to convince you it thought only in numbers and clean lines. It had done a poor job handling death. Raghav Sinha lay on the carpet near the desk, on his side, legs bent awkwardly. The pistol rested close to his right hand. Blood had spread in a dark fan under his head and dried to a dull crust. His eyes were half open, staring at the base of a filing cabinet. I have seen bodies in worse shape, but there is nothing normal about any of them. I gave him a quick, professional look and then let my gaze travel around the room. The first item that snagged my attention was the wristwatch. It lay a couple of feet from his extended arm, the crystal cracked, the band broken. The face angled up at me, frozen hands pointing at 10:42. I noted it, then left it alone. On the desk, a wide metal tray held a scatter of blueprints. At one end of the tray, a burnt fragment curled over the edge like a charred leaf. Ash still clung to the metal. I moved closer. The sheet had been a large site plan or structural drawing, white with blue lines, burned roughly in the middle, as if a match or lighter had been held to it and then snatched away. The edges were uneven, parts were missing completely. The top right corner was torn clean off. A standard lighter sat on the desk near the tray, shiny and innocently closed. The window behind the desk was open a crack. Not much, maybe 2 inches, but wide enough to matter. Cold November air slipped in and stroked my face. The latch was in the closed position. Someone had been creative. And then there was the soundtrack. The parrot had commandeered a stand near the far wall, between 2 file cabinets. It was green with a yellowish head and a sharply curved beak, 1 foot wrapped around the perch. The other tucked up. Its dark eye watched me with the flat patience only birds and predators have. When it spoke, the sound crawled right across the room. "No. Don't do it, stop." The words came in a high, strained pitch, shredded by panic and repetition. The bird flared its wings a little, then settled. I walked over to it, slow and steady. "Hello," I said. It tilted its head. "Archie Goodwin," I offered. "I investigate trouble. You seem to have heard some." The parrot ruffled its feathers and squawked louder. "No. Don't do it, stop." The second time it sounded exactly like the first. Same pitch, same rhythm, like a gramophone needle stuck in a groove. I looked back at the door. The lock was a standard office model, turn button on the inside, keyhole outside. A crime scene sticker sealed the frame. According to the report, they'd had to force it this morning. The splintered wood around the strike plate agreed. From the doorway, I heard a voice I knew far too well. Goodwin. I turned. Inspector Kramer filled the opening like a boulder forgetting to be polite. His jaw was set, his hat pushed back, his cigar clamped in a corner of his mouth and unlit only because the rules said so. Two plainclothes men hovered behind him. "Afternoon, Inspector," I said. "I see the rumor mill works." I hadn't even finished annoying the bird yet. He stepped inside, giving the room a hard once-over the way a bulldozer gives a field of bushes. "Wolfe sent you?" "He did. This is the late Mr. Sinha's partner's idea. She wants answers. Parrot included." The parrot obliged on cue. "No. Don't do it, stop." Kramer grimaced. "If that thing keeps it up, I'll charge it with disturbing the peace." "Why don't you charge it as a witness?" I suggested. "Might brighten up the courtroom." His glare could have melted the window glass. "We've got a straightforward suicide." Door was locked from the inside, key in the Vic's pocket. Pistol near his hand. No signs of a second party. The coroner's satisfied. I don't need Wolfe or his stooge inventing ghosts. I ignored the stooge remark. Does the straightforward suicide normally burn part of a blueprint and stop right in the middle? He glanced at the tray. Maybe he changed his mind about destroying it. Maybe he dropped it when he shot himself. People do odd things before they die. What about the watch? I asked. Stopped at 10:42, lying away from the body. Did he fling it off as a parting gesture? Goodbye, cruel punctuality. One of the boys probably kicked it moving in here, Kramer said. We'll verify. Don't start writing poetry about it. What about the window? I moved to it and pointed. Open a crack, latch apparently shut. And before you say it, yes, November can get warm, but not that warm. He stomped over, inspected the gap, grunted. Forensics says it was like that when they came in. Could have been left open earlier. Fresh air, smoke, who knows? I tested the frame with 2 fingers, careful not to smudge anything. The wood was solid. The sill was dusted with a fine gray film, construction residue, typical for a design firm that liked models and samples. Near the left side, where the window met the wall, the dust was slightly disturbed, a faint smear as if something had brushed past. Mind if I look at the hallway outside this wall? I asked. Within reason. Kramer folded his arms. You're a guest here. Try not to redecorate my scene. I stepped back into the corridor and assessed the building layout. Sinha's office sat at the corner of the floor, windows on 2 sides. If someone had wanted to approach from outside, they'd needed a good head for heights, a cooperative fire escape, or a talent for ladders. I found what I expected at the far end of the corridor, an access door to the stairwell leading to the roof. It wasn't locked, just closed. The hinges squeaked in protest when I opened it. I poked my head into the stairwell, then climbed up 1 flight. The metal door to the roof had a simple bar lock and a city-sanctioned sign warning that people who went up there were not the city's fault. I didn't push it open. That kind of exploration was for after Kramer signed off or Wolfe decided it was worth bribing someone. Back inside the office, I went to the desk. A notepad sat near the phone. No dramatic farewell message, just a quick list in reasonably neat handwriting. Call surveyor. Confirm steel delivery. Meet AM Re, Phase 3. I tapped the last line. That AM stands for Anjali Mehra? Kramer nodded. She confirmed. They were supposed to go over some project issues this morning. Meeting got cancelled for obvious reasons. Did he sound depressed lately? Defeated? Ready to escape the burdens of steel delivery and Phase 3? Kramer's frown deepened. We spoke to his staff. Some said he seemed tense the last few weeks. Others said business was fine. No suicide note. But sometimes you don't get a note. You get a corpse and a pile of unfinished paperwork. The parrot squawked again, louder, as if offended. No. Don't do it, stop. We both looked at it. Where was that thing when you found the body? I asked. Same place, Kramer said. On the stand. One of the officers nearly jumped out of his skin when it started yelling. The building manager says it usually just mutters and whistles office gossip. I studied the bird. It stared back, unblinking. You see the problem, I said. The phrase has a subject and an object. Don't do it sounds like someone addressing someone. You don't tell yourself to stop like that when you're alone with a gun. Not in that tone. Kramer blew out a breath. Parrots copy voices. Whoever said that could have said it months ago, years ago. Maybe they were arguing over a business decision. A bid. A vacation. A pair of shoes. I am not building a homicide case on a bird. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you not to close the door on the possibility that this is more than a one-man show. He looked at the body, the watch, the blueprint tray, the window, the bird. The pieces didn't line up neatly, and he knew it. He also knew that once Wolfe smelled asymmetry, he clamped onto it. You tell Wolfe, Kramer said slowly, that I'm filing it as a probable suicide. If he finds something solid that proves otherwise, he can parade it before me and I'll listen. Until then, his opinions stay in his chair with him. I'll deliver the message, I said. But you know him. Opinions leak. Kramer turned away, barking orders at his men. I took one more slow tour of the office, fixing every angle in my head, the distance from the desk to the body, the path from the door to the window, the position of the chair, the orientation of the watch, the shape of the burnt pattern on the blueprint fragment. My memory is good. Wolfe's is better. Between us, the room would not be allowed to forget. As I stepped out, the parrot screamed one more time, like it knew I was leaving. No. Don't do it, stop. I paused in the doorway and glanced back at it. Yeah, I said softly. We'll see what he did. And who didn't stop. Out in the waiting area, Anjali stood with her arms folded tight, talking to no one. When she saw me, she straightened. Well, she asked. Did you see anything? I saw enough to make Wolfe grumpy, I said. Which means you're not crazy to have doubts. That will have to do for now. Her eyes searched my face for hope. I kept my own expression neutral, it's better for business and for the truth. Let's go, I said. I owe my employer a description of one corpse, one desk, one window with attitude, one suspiciously damaged drawing, and one very loud parrot. She flinched at the mention of the bird, then nodded and followed me out. The locked room behind us stayed barred and silent, but it had told me one thing clearly. It was lying. And Nero Wolfe hates a liar. Chapter 3, Clues in Feathers and Fire. By the time Anjali and I reached the brownstone, Wolfe had finished with his orchids and settled into his chair like a man preparing to judge the fate of nations. The moment he heard the front door open, he called out. Goodwin. Report. I guided Anjali inside, then went to my desk. Wolfe didn't look at her first. He looked at me, because in Wolfe's world, facts arrive by courier and I happened to be the courier. I started at the beginning. The office was sealed. Standard police presence. Sinha was on the floor near the desk, gun close by. No sign of a struggle, but the picture is messy. Wolfe's eyes sharpened. Messy how? His watch was several feet away. Broken band, frozen at 10:42. A piece of blueprint was partially burned, someone started to destroy it and then stopped. Also, the window behind the desk was open a crack even though the latch was in the locked position. Wolfe's frown deepened. A contradiction. Yes. And then there's the parrot. At the word parrot, Wolfe shut his eyes as though I had slapped him with poultry. Spare me, he muttered. I wish I could. But the bird repeats a single sentence with the exact same tone every time. No. Don't do it, stop. It doesn't sound like random mimicry. Anjali, sitting tensely across from Wolfe, folded her hands until her knuckles went white. It repeats that from morning till night, she said softly. It has never said those words before. Wolfe opened his eyes and regarded her with a steadiness that made most people confess sins they hadn't committed. Miss Mara, he said, I need you calm. Grief often invents ghosts. There was no ghost in that room, she answered. There was someone else. Her voice didn't rise, but something in the way she spoke made the air in the office feel tighter. Wolfe gestured toward me without looking. Continue. The police are stamping it as suicide, I said. Kramer isn't ready to fight his own evidence. Door locked from inside, key in Raghav's pocket. No prints except his. But the details don't play nicely together. Wolfe nodded once, as if the puzzle had just announced itself properly. What about the blueprint fragment, he asked. I didn't bring it, I said. Kramer would have eaten my hand if I tried. But half of it is gone and the remaining section has burn marks around the edges. Something on it scared someone enough to destroy it. Wolfe turned his gaze to Anjali. Tell me what project that drawing belonged to. She swallowed. It was part of the Riverfront Towers development, our largest project. Raghav and I handled separate sections. He oversaw the structural planning. I led design. What would force a man to burn his own blueprint? Wolfe asked. He wouldn't, she said. Raghav valued his work too much. If he wanted something gone, he would shred it. He was methodical. Wolfe rubbed his chin. So someone else burned it. Someone who lacked time. I nodded. Fits the scene. And this window, Wolfe said. Describe exactly. Cracked open from the inside, but the latch was in the lockdown position. Someone forced it open from inside or outside, but it doesn't match a man preparing to shoot himself. Wolfe took a deep breath, large enough to be registered as weather. Archie, what do you infer? That the room was prepared to look like suicide, I said. But if that's true, the killer needed a way out. The window is the only path. Wolfe grunted. A risky route. 6 stories up. Risky isn't impossible. Anjali leaned forward. There's something else, she whispered. Raghav told me 2 days ago that he found inconsistencies in the Riverfront project. Wolfe's head turned slightly. Inconsistencies? He didn't want to discuss it over the phone, she said. Only in person. He said it involved numbers that didn't belong. Something someone hoped he wouldn't notice. Wolfe's eyes flashed. Fraud. Yes, she said. He was planning to confront our investors about it. Wolfe set his jaw. And now he's dead. Silence hovered in the room for a moment, thick as fog. Then Wolfe leaned forward. When Wolfe leans, mountains should pay attention. Miss Mara, he said, I require a list of every individual who could have gained from Mr. Sinha's death. I can give you that, she said. But it's long. Then give me the first 5. She began listing names. Mira D'Souza, Leonard Harrow, Tom Vellum, Dev Prakash, Sophia Calderon. Each came with a small tremor of hesitation, as though she feared she was betraying them simply by speaking the syllables. Wolfe waved his hand. Enough for a beginning. I looked at him. What's the next step? He folded his hands. I want to see the remaining blueprint fragments. I also want to hear this parrot myself. A repeating phrase, delivered with emotional accuracy, is peculiar. You're actually opening your door to a bird. I said. No, Wolfe snapped. You will bring the bird here. I blinked. And risk becoming a one-man circus? That parrot hates everyone. Wolfe glared. Archie. Get the bird. Anjali stood abruptly. I'll go with him. The parrot knows me. I can handle it. Wolfe lifted his eyebrows. Can you handle hearing it repeat a possible death scene? Her face paled, but she nodded. Yes. If that's what it takes to find the truth. Wolfe regarded her for another long moment, gauging strength, not drama. He must have liked what he saw, because he looked away. Very well, he said. Archie will retrieve the parrot after dusk. In the meantime, Miss Mara, I have questions. She sat again, and Wolfe began his interrogation. Not aggressive, but sharp enough to peel varnish off furniture. I watched her answer each question with trembling honesty. She didn't hide her partnership with Raghav, their disagreements over business, or the recent tension between them. Nothing she said felt rehearsed. But something in her eyes, a flicker, small and quick, told me there was a piece of the story she hadn't shared yet. Wolfe must have caught it too. His gaze sharpened like a hawk spotting a twitch in the grass. Miss Mara, he said softly, there's something you're still holding back. She froze. The room went still enough to feel the shape of silence. Finally, she whispered, Raghav wanted to meet with me last night. He said it was urgent. I told him I couldn't. Her eyes glistened. He died alone, she said. Because I didn't go. Wolfe inhaled slowly, then leaned back. Guilt is not evidence, he said. But withholding details is foolish. If you recall anything else, anything at all, you will tell me. She nodded, shaken. Wolfe turned his head toward me. Archie. Yes. We are not dealing with suicide. The signs are clear. This was staged. Anjali's breath caught. Wolfe continued, someone committed a grave error, they left behind details they could not erase. The burnt blueprint. The stopped watch. The window. And most damning of all. He paused. The parrot. I sighed. Of course. The bird becomes a witness. Not a witness, Wolfe corrected. A mirror. It repeats what it hears, and what it heard was fear. The office light flickered as afternoon turned to evening. The case had stopped whispering. It had begun to speak. Chapter 4, Interviewing Shadows. The next morning broke gray and unforgiving, as if the sky itself disapproved of what happened in that office. Wolfe sent me out before breakfast, which is his way of showing the world he's suffering. I left the brownstone with a folder, a list of names Anjali had provided, and the lingering thought that the parrot might be the most honest witness in the whole mess. My first stop was the riverfront project site, a raw maze of steel beams, scaffolding, and half-finished dreams. The sounds of drilling and clanging echoed off the river. Workers moved like ants, focused, busy, and pretending not to notice a stranger approaching with a notebook. I found Dev Prakash, the site supervisor, barking orders at two men hauling rebar. He was stocky and stiff-jawed, with shoulders built from years of lifting things no human should enjoy lifting. When he spotted me, he narrowed his eyes. You're not here for a tour, detective? I asked. I know the type, he grunted. What do you want? I'm looking into Mr. Sinha's death. His mouth twitched, not with sorrow, with annoyance. Already talked to the cops. Talk to me. He wiped dust from his hands. Raghav was smart. Too smart, maybe. Always checking deliveries, asking questions. Sometimes questions that didn't need asking. Such as, why certain materials were delayed. Why certain invoices changed. Why steel counts didn't match what arrived. I watched him carefully. His tone held irritation, not grief. Suspicious. Did he accuse you of anything? I asked. Dev's jaw tightened. He asked for numbers. I gave them. If he thought something was wrong, he didn't say it to my face. That bother you? He wasn't afraid to confront people. If he had a problem with me, he would have said it straight. Maybe someone else didn't appreciate that honesty. A crane groaned overhead, and Dev stepped back. I've got work. If you want to keep snooping, try the investors. They smile too much. He walked off, leaving a cloud of dust and tension behind him. My next stop was the design office, where I found Mira de Souza staring at a 3D model with the cold intensity of a surgeon. Her bob haircut was sharp enough to cut steel, and her heels clicked like she was keeping time with her own thoughts. Miss de Souza? I said. She turned with a measured look. Yes. Archie Goodwin. I'm helping investigate Mr. Sinha's death. She raised an eyebrow, not out of surprise but annoyance. I assumed the police closed that already. They closed the file. Wolfe didn't. Her posture stiffened. Of course he didn't. Raghav trusted you, I said. At least according to the staff. She sighed sharply. Trust isn't relevant. We worked together. We fought, we compromised, we produced results. That's architecture. Did you two argue recently? She hesitated just long enough to confirm the answer. We disagreed on a few decisions. Nothing unusual. Blueprint decisions. Is this about the fragment they found? She said sharply. Maybe. She crossed her arms. Raghav didn't burn his own drawings. He was meticulous. If something was wrong with that blueprint, someone else changed it. That someone include you? I asked casually. Her eyes flashed. I've been in this firm longer than anyone. I don't sabotage my own livelihood. Who would? I asked. She looked away. Pressure has been building. Delays. Budget problems. Investors demanding miracles. Some people crack earlier than others. Name one. She didn't answer. But the silence was louder than confession. From there, I visited the administrative section of the office, where Sofia Calderon, the office manager, sat behind her desk with a stack of folders organized by color gradient. She was efficient, calm, and guarded, like a filing cabinet with a pulse. Mr. Goodwin, she said without being told my name. Inspector Kramer warned me you might appear. Then he ruined the surprise, I said. I'm asking about Raghav. Her gaze softened, but only slightly. He was good to us. Demanding, but fair. What about the last few weeks? Her fingers tapped a nervous rhythm against the desk. He looked tired. He was stressed about the riverfront project. He mentioned someone was interfering. Who? I don't know, she said. Her eyes flicked away, which meant she did. But he said something didn't add up. I lowered my voice. Sophia, did he say he feared for himself? She paused. He never said he was in danger. But he began locking his office door more often. And at night? Her jaw clenched. He stayed late every day this week. He ordered me to leave the hard copies of the financial sheets on his desk Thursday night. The sheets that weren't there when he died. Did you notice anything else? I asked. She wrung her hands, and that simple gesture told me she was hiding something bigger. There were 2 sets of invoices, she said finally. One Raghav saw. One someone else prepared. Someone in this office? I didn't say that. No, but she had. I left the office and walked around the building, checking angles, sightlines, and shadows. That was when I ran into Harold Greeley, the night guard. He was leaning against the side entrance, sipping coffee, pretending the world didn't scare him as much as it did. He recognized me immediately. Not him again, he muttered. Hello to you too, I said. I don't know anything, he said quickly. Too quickly. You were on duty the night before the death. Well, yes. Did you see anyone near Rogov's window? He froze. I waited. Finally, he whispered, there was someone. Couldn't see his face. Dark clothes. Moving fast. I thought it was one of the engineers. Why didn't you report it? He stared at his coffee. Because I wasn't exactly at my post the whole night. Girlfriend? He nodded miserably. Which means you didn't see who went in or out. I'm sorry, he whispered. But someone definitely climbed near that window. Maybe using the maintenance ledge. That piece of information struck with the weight of certainty. It matched the faint dust smear I'd seen under the window frame. Someone had been on that wall. And someone had lied about it. Before I returned to the brownstone, I made one last stop, the investor offices downtown, where Leonard Harrow held court like a king who never doubted his crown. His office had more mahogany than the average courtroom. He shook my hand too warmly, smiled too widely, and said all the right condolences with all the wrong sincerity. Terrible loss, Harrow said. Brilliant man. A shame he couldn't manage the pressure. The word pressure didn't sit right. He told colleagues the finances were off, I said. Harrow laughed, a smooth, oily sound. Architects never understand budgets. Numbers frighten them. I leaned closer. Did he frighten you, Mr. Harrow? The smile slipped a fraction. Careful, Mr. Goodwin. I'm a patient man, but not fond of baseless accusations. Neither is Wolfe. That got his attention. He straightened. You tell your employer this, business is complicated, and riverfront is delicate. If he interferes, I'll consider it harassment. I grinned. He'll embroider that on a handkerchief. Harrow's jaw tightened. And that told me exactly what Wolfe needed to know. Harrow wasn't sad Rogov was dead. He was inconvenienced. When I finally stepped back into the brownstone, the afternoon sun had dipped low, casting long shadows across Wolfe's office. He sat with his eyes half closed, sipping beer as though it contained the secrets of civilization. Report, he said. I handed him my notes. We've got lies, secrets, and fingerprints of fear all over that firm. Everyone had something to lose if Rogov talked. Wolfe opened his eyes fully. And the parrot? Still screaming. Good, he said. Its honesty may embarrass this entire city before we're finished. The room fell quiet. I felt it before he said it, that faint shift in air pressure when Wolfe has reached a conclusion he isn't ready to share. This, Wolfe murmured, is no ordinary murder. The light outside dimmed, and the shadows stretched across the floor like warning signs. Somewhere in the darkness of the city, someone was waiting for us to make the wrong move. They were going to be disappointed. Chapter 5, Wolfe's Reconstruction. Rain tapped gently against the brownstone windows as Archie and I stepped into Wolfe's office. The atmosphere felt heavy, as if the evidence itself carried the weight of the truth we were close to uncovering. Wolfe sat upright in his large chair, eyes fixed on the scorched blueprint lying on the desk. The faint burn marks formed uneven patterns across the paper, like someone had tried to destroy it in a hurry. Report, Wolfe said. Archie explained everything he found at the construction site, Dev's frustration, the strange tension among the workers, and the details the night guard provided. Wolfe listened in silence, his fingers tapping together slowly. Good, Wolfe finally said. Now we test the facts. He motioned to the blueprint. This was burned quickly, without thought. Notice the edges, irregular. No attempt to hide the burn completely. That means panic, not planning. Archie nodded. Someone wanted it gone fast. Wolfe continued, the window is the key. If someone escaped through it, the room could still appear locked from the inside. Before Archie could respond, Wolfe stood, something he rarely did unless the situation demanded it. He walked to the window and opened it just an inch. "Watch," he said. With careful movement, he demonstrated how the latch could fall into place after someone slipped out onto the narrow ledge. A simple shift of weight, a small jerk of the frame, and the latch clicked closed again. Archie raised an eyebrow. "So the killer didn't vanish. They climbed out." "Precisely," Wolfe replied. "The room did not keep the killer in. It gave them a way out." Wolfe returned to his desk. "Now, the wristwatch." The broken hand stopped at a very specific time. Too neat. Too perfect. Another detail staged for effect. He glanced at Archie. A staged time means someone wanted us to believe a story. And whenever someone creates a story, they leave their own reflection behind. Before Archie could answer, the parrot in its cage let out a sharp scream. "No. Don't do it, stop." The cry filled the room, sharp enough to make the air tremble. Wolfe turned toward the bird, studying it the way he studied every clue, with cold precision. "That," Wolfe said, "is the most important evidence we have." Archie tilted his head. "Because it heard the struggle?" "No," Wolfe said quietly. "Because it repeats fear. And it repeats it in a woman's tone." Archie froze. The words hit the room like a sudden chill. Wolfe didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. It repeats the exact pitch and urgency of Miss Mara's voice. A heavy silence settled between them. Wolfe lowered himself back into his chair. "Archie, summon her. We are done with shadows and guesses. Now she tells us everything." Archie nodded and reached for the phone. Wolfe folded his hands and stared at the burned blueprint, as if the last piece of the puzzle was already speaking to him. The room felt different now, quiet, tense, waiting. Something was about to break. Chapter 6, The Confession Trembles In. The storm outside arrived exactly when Wolfe predicted it would, late afternoon, with low thunder sliding across the city like a warning. The brownstone grew darker, the shadows longer. Wolfe had closed the curtains to keep the gray light from dulling his orchids, but it made his office feel like a courtroom without windows. He sat at his desk, motionless except for his fingers tapping together in a slow rhythm he used only when narrowing in on a truth. "Archie," he said, "call Miss Mara." I didn't need to ask why. Wolfe only summons suspects when his mind has already crossed the finish line. I dialed her number. The phone rang twice before she answered with a voice that sounded smaller than before. "Miss Mara," I said, "Mr. Wolfe requires your presence." She didn't ask what for. She only whispered, "I'll come." 20 minutes later, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Anjali standing in the doorway with the storm behind her, rain clinging to her hair and coat. She looked thinner than the last time we saw her, hollowed out by dread. "Please," she said softly. "Let's finish this." I led her to Wolfe's office. She stepped inside and froze. Something about Wolfe's posture, upright, unyielding, told her she wasn't here for comfort. "Miss Mara," Wolfe said. "Sit." She obeyed, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Wolfe didn't begin with condolences or small talk. He struck straight at the heart. "You argued with Raghav Sinha on the night of his death." Anjali's breath hitched. "No. You argued," Wolfe repeated calmly. "You went to his office after hours. You demanded he stop whatever action he intended to take. The parrot repeats those words with your tone and your pitch." Her eyes widened, then fluttered shut as if the world tilted under her. "No," she whispered again. But her voice wasn't refusing, it was breaking. Wolfe continued, each word steady and sharp. "You fought. You shoved him. He fell. He died instantly. Lightning flared outside as if answering him." Anjali's shoulders collapsed inward. Her hands trembled violently. I didn't mean to." "There it is," Wolfe murmured. "The truth. She covered her face with both hands. Her voice spilled out between sobs, jagged, desperate. He told me he had the proof. He said Nero would be exposed. Fraud, bribery, everything. He demanded I review the changes he found. He wanted to go to the authorities. And you objected? Wolfe asked. I begged him to wait. I told him it wasn't safe. Nero has influence. Money. Connections. Her voice cracked. Rugov refused. He said we had a responsibility. And so you went to his office that night? Yes, she whispered. I wanted to calm him. To make him reconsider. Wolfe leaned back slightly. But it escalated. I told him he was being reckless. He said I was afraid of losing our company. He said I'd grown too cautious. We argued, louder than we ever had. She pressed her palms against her eyes. He turned away from me. I tried to stop him leaving. I grabbed his arm. He pulled back. I pushed, I just wanted him to stop for a second. Her words dissolved into quiet, trembling breaths. He stumbled, she whispered. Hit the floor. And when I turned him over, he wasn't breathing. She shook her head as if trying to erase the memory. I panicked. I didn't think. I only saw everything ending. Everything we built. Everything he wanted to fix. And instead of calling for help, Wolfe said, you staged the room. Her face lost what little color remained. I know. I know. I hid the papers. Burned part of the blueprint he found. I tried to make it look like he had done something tragic. I didn't want Nero to come after me. Or the firm. And the window? I asked gently. I climbed out. There's a maintenance ledge. I used it. I left through the stairwell instead of the main hall. I was terrified. The storm outside swelled, rain hammering the windows. She dropped her hands. Tears streaked her cheeks, but her voice steadied, like confession had emptied something out of her. I didn't want him dead, she said. I loved him. Not romantically. She shook her head. But he was my family. My friend. The best part of the work we did. Wolfe watched her without blinking. Fear, he said quietly, is a poor architect. It builds traps faster than towers. She nodded, shaking. Wolfe motioned to me. Archie. I stepped beside her. Wolfe spoke clearly, firmly, Miss Mara, Inspector Kramer will arrive momentarily. You will give him your full statement. Every detail. She didn't argue. She didn't beg. She only whispered, I'm so sorry. At that moment, the parrot, still in its temporary cage by Wolfe's bookshelf, lifted its head and shrieked across the room. No. Don't do it, stop. The sound cut through the air like a blade. Anjali shuddered. Her hands gripped the arms of the chair. She didn't look at the bird, she didn't have to. It was her voice echoing her worst memory. Wolfe took a slow breath. There, he said softly. The final witness. A knock thundered at the front door. Kramer. I guided Anjali to her feet. She followed without resistance, her steps light, almost drifting, as though she had finally run out of fear and was left only with truth. Behind us, Wolfe exhaled, a long, heavy sound, and reached for his beer, the storm still roaring outside. The case was nearly done. But its echoes would linger. Chapter 7, The Only Witness. Inspector Kramer slammed into the brownstone like a storm that had grown legs. His coat dripped rainwater onto the front rug, and his jaw looked locked in place by sheer indignation. I guided him down the hall while Anjali walked behind us with the slow, dazed steps of someone who has already surrendered to fate. When we reached Wolfe's office, Kramer didn't wait for an invitation. All right, Wolfe, he barked, you dragged me out in the middle of a downpour. What's this about a confession? Wolfe didn't flinch. Good evening, Inspector. Kindly refrain from dripping on my carpet. That depends, Kramer snapped. Did you actually uncover something, or am I here to listen to one of your philosophical speeches? Wolfe tilted his head toward Anjali. Miss Mara has something to tell you. Her hands shook as she stepped forward. She didn't try to compose herself, she didn't even wipe the tears still clinging to her cheeks. Her voice came out soft but steady. I killed Raghav, she said. Kramer blinked. The room seemed to pause for half a breath. You, what? He demanded. She repeated it. This time there was no tremor. Just bare truth. Kramer stared at her as if she'd spoken in a language he hadn't been trained to translate. Start from the beginning. Every detail. She did. She told him about the argument. The panic. The fall. The desperate attempt to hide what happened. She explained how she burned the blueprint, climbed out of the window, and left the scene looking like suicide. She never raised her voice, never dramatized anything. She simply laid her actions out piece by piece like stones on a table. When she finished, her shoulders sank. I'm ready to go, she whispered. Kramer drew a long breath, then let it out slowly. His frustration melted into something heavier, resignation. Why didn't you tell us this sooner? He asked, softer now. Because I was afraid, she said. I didn't think anyone would believe it was an accident. And I didn't want the truth about the project corruption to die with him. Corruption? Kramer shot Wolfe a glare. And of course you knew all about that. All I knew, Wolfe replied, was that her fear was not of guilt, but exposure. And fear leaves fingerprints all its own. Kramer grunted. It was the closest thing he ever offered to agreement. As he pulled handcuffs from his coat, the parrot in the corner cage stirred. Its feathers puffed, eyes gleaming in the dim light. The looming silence broke suddenly as it launched into its chilling cry. No. Don't do it, stop. Kramer jolted so hard he nearly dropped the cuffs. Good God, does that thing ever shut up? It repeats what it heard, Wolfe said quietly. And what it heard was Miss Mara's voice in fear and desperation. Anjali covered her face. The sound cut through her like a reopened wound. Kramer hesitated, lowering the cuffs a moment. You shoved him, he said carefully. But you didn't pull a trigger. If the fall killed him instantly, the charge may not be murder. She didn't look up. It doesn't matter. I caused it. Wolfe interjected, his tone firm. Inspector, she attempted a cover-up. That will complicate the matter. But the absence of intent will be clear. I stepped beside her, speaking gently. Anjali, it's over. You did the hardest part. She nodded once, a tiny motion, but one that seemed to release the remainder of her strength. Kramer finally approached with the cuffs. Miss Mara, you'll come with me. You'll give a full written statement. The DA will decide the final charge. She didn't resist. She offered her wrists with a kind of quiet acceptance that made even Kramer pause. He fastened the cuffs without roughness. Before he let her out, she turned to Wolfe. Thank you, she said softly. I didn't come here for forgiveness. I came for the truth. You gave me that. Wolfe inclined his head. Truth is never a kindness, Miss Mara. But it is a necessity. Go with the inspector. She managed a faint, sad smile. Then Kramer guided her out of the office, down the hall, and into the storm. The front door shut. Silence filled the brownstone, deep, heavy, final. Then the parrot spoke one more time, but not in fear. Its voice came softer, almost weary. No, don't. A fragment of the past, echoing through the room. I crossed the office and draped a cloth gently over the cage. The bird rustled once, then grew quiet. Wolfe watched me. "You're unusually gentle with animals tonight," he said. "It's had a hard week," I replied. "Hasn't everyone?" Wolfe exhaled and closed his eyes. "Archie, prepare the report." I nodded, picked up my notebook, and sat at my desk under the warm lamplight. Outside, thunder rolled low across the sky, fading into the distance. The truth had come out, dragged, uncovered, confessed. The locked room had lost its mystery. The last witness had finally fallen silent. Tomorrow, life at the brownstone would return to normal. But tonight, the echoes of a frightened voice still lingered in the corners of my mind. Chapter 8, When Silence Finally Spoke. Morning arrived gently, the kind of soft, pale sunlight that tries to make peace with the night before. The storm had cleared, leaving the streets washed clean and the brownstone wrapped in a quiet that felt almost respectful. Wolfe came down from the plant rooms later than usual. Even orchids had to wait when murder shook the schedule. He settled into his chair with a sigh heavy enough to register on a seismograph and motioned for coffee. I brought the tray, setting it down beside him. "You worked late," he said without looking at me. "I wrote the report," I replied. "And made sure the parrot slept. It stopped screaming around 3. Wolfe grunted. Even birds grow weary of repeating tragedy. He picked up his cup, sipped, and closed his eyes as if absorbing caffeine through his soul. The silence stretched, but not uncomfortably. We'd earned a moment or two. Before long, the doorbell rang. I answered it and found Inspector Kramer standing there, already scowling like it was a habit he couldn't break. "Morning," I said. "Come to congratulate Wolfe?" "Hardly," he growled, stepping inside. "Came to confirm the statements are filed. Mara's confession matches the forensic timing. No inconsistencies. DA will pursue an involuntary manslaughter charge." "I hope you brought Wolfe a fruit basket," I said. He ignored me and strode into the office. Wolfe glanced up, clearly displeased at having his morning invaded. "Well?" Wolfe asked. "It's done," Kramer said. "But I'll say this, if that bird hadn't been screeching like a banshee, we might have closed the case wrong." Wolfe raised an eyebrow. "Then you owe it gratitude." Kramer shot him a look. "I don't owe thanks to a parrot. Or to you." "Of course not," Wolfe replied calmly. "Your gratitude would be unseemly." Kramer huffed, turned, and left as abruptly as he arrived. The front door clicked shut, and peace flooded back into the house. Wolfe leaned back, steepling his fingers. A satisfactory outcome. I sat at my desk. Strange case, though. "All cases are strange," Wolfe said. "Human nature makes them so." "Still," I continued, "it's not every day a parrot cracks the silence." Wolfe opened one eye. The bird did nothing but speak what it heard. It was we who finally listened. That sounded like a philosophical speech loading in the chamber, so I decided to redirect. "What do we do with it now?" "The parrot?" Wolfe asked. "Unless you want it to stay here." "No," his answer came instantly. "My home is a sanctuary, not an aviary. See that it is returned to whomever is legally responsible once the police release it. I'll handle it." Wolfe closed his eyes again. "Archie." "Yes." Truth rarely shouts. Most often it murmurs. Sometimes it hides in guilt. Sometimes in numbers. And occasionally, he paused, in feathers. I grinned. "I'll remember that." He waved me off, already drifting toward whatever complex tangle of thought he was sorting in his head. I turned back to my desk and reviewed the file one last time. A shattered partnership. A project full of secrets. A moment of fear that changed everything. And a bird repeating the last thing it heard because it didn't know how to lie. Outside, the city hummed back to life, taxis, footsteps, a vendor calling out breakfast specials. The ordinary world resumed its rhythm, unaware of the storm that had passed inside a locked office, a frightened heart, and a brownstone on West 35th Street. I closed the file. The case was over. And somewhere in a quiet back room, a covered parrot cage held a creature that had spoken more truth than half the witnesses in New York. Wolfe reached for his book. "Archie," he said without looking up, "we return to routine." Routine, in Wolfe's dictionary, meant orchids, beer, and waiting for trouble to knock on our door again. I stood and stretched. "Fine by me," I said. "Peace never lasts long around here." The words hadn't even settled in the air when the doorbell rang again. Wolfe groaned loudly. I smiled. And just like that, the world rolled on, noisy and unpredictable, ready for the next voice asking for help.